Hi class, good morning still. Here it's about 10 minutes after I was informed by your classmates that I had inadvertently missed class, and about 30 minutes after the start of class time. So I am so sorry. I was reading essays and was just deep in thought and totally lost track of time, and my computer usually alerts me that I have meetings, including class time, and that did not happen today. And I'm not sure why, maybe a glitch with the internet. But my apologies, that's never happened to me before, and I hope it never happens to me again. So thank you all for coming. I may ask you guys to write your name down or something to tell me that you came today, and give you all a little brownie point of some kind. But regardless, I still need to cover some material today, so I'm going to take that time from my office instead of from class. So I'm going to share my screen. It might just be a little bit clumsy because I didn't practice this, because I didn't expect it to be online today. But hopefully just stick with me even if I'm fumbling around, because I'm going to share my screen a lot to show you guys these campaign advertisements I intended on showing today in class. And I will discuss them after each one, but we'll also re-talk about them on Friday. So we can start with the campaign advertisements, what we did not get to on Monday. Here we are. We talked about how much it costs to win an election and how it has gone up so much, and that sometimes that's a barrier to entry, not just because not all of us have that much money, but because not very many people are well suited to cold calling rich people and asking them for it. Well, one thing we didn't talk about was how communication technology, from the radio to the television to the internet, has changed campaigns. And so one famous anecdote is from the first televised presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And as the anecdote goes, those who watched on television thought that John F. Kennedy won because they thought he had a more commanding presence. He's probably more objectively attractive, conventionally attractive, I should say, not objectively. Richard Nixon was reportedly sweating and maybe under the weather and looked very nervous. And people who watched on the television thought that Richard Nixon lost the debate. Those who listened on the radio voted that Richard Nixon had won the debate because they thought he sounded more presidential and he had better policy answers than John F. Kennedy. And the conventional logic here is that the television changed our expectations of the presidency, that now not only do they have to have a commanding presence, but they have to be what's called telegenic, looking good on television. And again, just like with those who are able to raise a lot of money, the question is that a criteria on which we want to base our presidential politics? So a knee-jerk reaction would probably be no. What does it have to do with being president to look good on television? But possibly in this modern era, a more practical answer is that maybe a president does need to have this gravitas on television, because that is how he is going to be speaking to the American people, and he needs to be well respected to maintain legitimacy and support, and therefore probably does need to look good on TV. Moreover, he needs to look good on TV, or she needs to look good on TV to other countries around the world who are watching America for its example and also for its leadership and power. So televised debates really did change the way we think about presidential debates and how we grade them. They aren't just based on answers anymore. They're based on how good you look and how calm you look giving these answers. Some examples of famous debates that it wouldn't have been so odd without television. You can think of all of these examples of people who didn't look good during their presidential debates because of telegenic issues. I remember Marco Rubio drinking his water really, really awkwardly on television, got him a lot of bad press. Mike Pence famously had the fly that wouldn't stop landing on his head, and people just really grabbed onto that and thought that was hilarious or worth mentioning. And then also the debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. President Trump's demeanor, pacing and standing in the background were well talked about, as well as Hillary Clinton's sort of cold, almost stoic, like robotic, like mannerisms. So those are some things about televised debates. Another thing that you can think about if you were going to run for office, let's say again, we're a Republican running in Western Carolina's the 11th district of North Carolina, you can think about micro-targeting. This is something that technology allows all representatives to do, because if you're running with either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, those parties all have a lot of this information. So they have information not only on your party and who you voted for, but on all kinds of things, from whether you've written a representative, whether you've attended a rally. They can even buy information from third parties, like, you know how Target and Amazon know exactly what you want to buy next. They can buy any kind of third party available information from corporations and companies and figure out what your tastes are, what you tend to gravitate toward, or what kinds of issues that you research online that you didn't necessarily let a politician know. This is called big data in this world, and you can use this information on any voter that you can get your hands on, analyze it statistically, and package different communications for different demographic groups. So if there's a big demographic group that is really pro-gun and anti-abortion, we can target them with a brochure or a mailer or a phone call that talks about how we have those same conservative values. That's what we're going to run on. But possibly for our more moderate voters, we could send a package on education or something like that. Now, remember, this is the same dichotomy in messaging that we were talking about between the primaries and the general election, that in the primaries, you would want to be more extreme, not necessarily extreme in a concerning way, but just more conservative if you're a Republican, more liberal if you're a Democrat. And in this hypothetical case, we're running as a Republican. So we're going to be more conservative in the primaries and more conservative in our micro-targeting to conservative constituents. But you don't want to flip-flop. People are going to find out if you're sending a mailer to one person that says you believe one thing and a mailer to someone else that contradicts that. So you don't want to be contradictory, just want to change your focus based on the group. We talked about campaigning and what works. Campaigning doesn't work when you call in annoying ways, when you robocall, or when you send mailers that aren't necessarily targeted to your demographic. Personal emails can work well, personal phone calls can work well, but the best thing that works is actually having either you or a volunteer or a staff member talk to people on a one-on-one basis. And this is called making touches. Now, we talked about how canvassing door to door is what is recommended in the book, Get Out the Vote, but might not be the best idea in every single district. And that would be true in ours. It's more successful in districts that have traditional neighborhoods where door knocking is less unusual. You get, door hangers offering lawn services and stuff like that. That's when you can go door to door. You shouldn't go door to door in a district where so many people have no trespassing, no solicitation signs, beware of dog signs, shotguns, all kinds of stuff like that. So you just want to be cognizant of your district, especially because not only is it a safety issue, but it's going to seem like you don't understand the district if you are encroaching on people's privacy in ways that they're not comfortable with. We talked about shaming, we talked about tricking. So for campaign advertisements, We'll talk about what works and what doesn't, but first I want to talk about how different changes have occurred from the 1950s to today. I'm going to pause sharing my video quickly, and hopefully this will go smoothly. To pull up something else. Nope, hold on. Again, I want to share my screen. Here we go. This works.
You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike.
The way that candidates communicate with voters tells us a lot about the politicians, but also about ourselves.
This is Senator John Kennedy.
President Johnson.
Jimmy Carter.
So it's an amazing lens on American culture and on American politics.
This time, vote like your whole world depended on it.
The biggest difference in ads that we see today is really in the editing. Today, we have a much faster pace. They splice different images together. There's much greater sophistication in the production that lies behind contemporary ads.
Eisenhower answers America.
The first presidential election where TV ads played a role was 1952. Dwight Eisenhower pulled together footage from press conferences and basically had Eisenhower answering America.
This historic moment is brought to you by Citizens for Kennedy.
1960 is really considered the first television election. That was the first election where we had TV debates between Kennedy and Nixon. Ads also were seen as very prominent because it was a way for Kennedy to basically contrast his youthfulness with Nixon's experience.
They understand what peace demands.
1964 was a very interesting election in that it featured a lot of attack ads. There is a famous ad called the Daisy ad. Incumbent President Lyndon Johnson had a little girl in a meadow pulling petals off of a daisy, and in the background you have the countdown, and at the end of the ad there's a nuclear explosion.
9, 8, 7.
By today's standards, it seems remarkably tame because we've seen a lot more vicious and personal attacks on individuals. But when that ad aired, it actually only aired once on network television. The public outcry was so strong that Johnson took down that ad and never aired it again.
Ever notice?
In the 1960s, television ads became more negative, and observers started to worry about ads becoming too manipulative. And then in the 1970s, people really just played to cynicism.
Jimmy Carter's candidacy is truly of the people and for the people.
I don't think there were big production value changes at that point in time. I mean, the editing starts to get a little more sophisticated, but nothing compared to what we saw in the 1980s.
It's morning again in America.
Reagan was a game changer in terms of TV advertising. Everything had to be just right. So Reagan put together an ad called Morning in America that basically showed the sun rising and the country doing better economically. All of these things combined to make for a very effective ad.
Dukakis on crime.
I've been studying ads for over 20 years. The very first campaign that I looked at was the 1992 presidential campaign between Clinton and Bush. That was a very interesting campaign. Clinton's people actually went out on the streets and found real validators of their message, and that really helped him win that election. 2000 was really the first race where the internet starts to be used by presidential candidates. They would put policy papers on the website. They would start to put ads that they had broadcast on the website. So you start to see the early usage of digital communications.
I served with John Kerry.
I served with John Kerry.
John Kerry has not been honest.
In 2004, we see independent groups running ads. You had the Swift Boat ads. Bush had a windsurfing ad that basically made the point that the guy was wishy-washy. He changed his position with the wind. I mean, what politicians have discovered is nothing is ever private anymore. We didn't see examples of that in 2008. Both McCain and Obama were careful about how they presented themselves. Today, everybody is a broadcaster. The goal today is to have your video go viral.
I got a crush on Obama till 2008.
In 2008, you have the Obama girls or the McCain girls.
He's so bold
And yet demure.
What we're really seeing is the democratization of video. We're seeing an explosion of super PACs this year owing to the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United. And so you have multimillionaires or billionaires who are writing checks to support advertising by outside groups. One of the problems is you can get a wide range of positive and negative messages. You can have outrageous attacks that are being broadcast or put into YouTube videos, and nothing can stop them. And so I think the greatest danger today is there's been a dramatic increase in factual inaccuracy in political communications.
High prices are just driving me crazy.
Yes, my Mamie gets after me about the high cost of living.
Ads are not just about the production technique. From the very beginning, ads have tried to connect the politician to the voter. Candidates who do well have to have a message that resonates with the nature of the times. So the ads today aren't that different in the sense that they focus on background, character, and leadership.
Okay, so hopefully this is all going smoothly. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But I think the major points that are important in this video are that since television has been around, campaign advertisements have been attempting to utilize visuals and optics to convince the public that they are the best candidate. Ranging from fear to patriotism, but almost always trying to make this personal connection. Even when editing was very primitive, it has always been a way of making a personal connection. Another really big important change is in 2012, when super PACs really hit the scene and unlimited amounts of money can be spent by corporations or other political action committees to make their message just absolutely cover the entire nation. They can use an extraordinary amount of money in order to do this. And this can really cause a big change in the way that we expect our politicians to look. It's also part of the reason for the rise in negative advertising, because it doesn't reflect poorly on the candidate if they're not the ones who actually made the advertisement. At least that's what they're hoping. The third really important point is that a successful campaign advertisement goes viral. They didn't really explain the nuts and bolts behind this. Obviously, everybody wants to go viral. That's how you become an influencer, and influencers are politicians now, right? Or politicians are influencers now, whichever way you want to look at it. But that's not just it. The reason you want your ad to go viral is because it's free replay. Not only by people playing it in their homes over and over again, on posting it on social media over and over again, but cable news channels actually just eat this up, and they will replay over and over and over the best or the worst ads. So if you have a really good ad, they'll replay it over and over again. If you have a really bad ad, they will too, which might just help you. If you have an unusual ad or a funny ad, those are the ones that also will get replayed over and over again. So I want to go ahead and share my screen again and give you some examples of negative, positive, and humorous ads. So first we have an example of a positive advertisement. Positive advertisements generally talk about the record of the person running, talk positively about their community, their experience, their policy choices. But a successful positive ad, just like any ad, will activate positive emotions. So we're thinking of, for a political office, emotions like patriotism, optimism for the future, all kinds of things like that. And you can think of campaigns that are famous for doing this, like Obama's Forward campaign, Reagan, which we saw in the previous clip, Reagan's idea that it's a morning in America again, just giving the warm fuzzies about the candidate, essentially. So I'm going to share my screen again to show you the example of a positive advertisement. Sorry, one more second.
This is a story about doors. A lot of them. And that's me, MJ Hagar, an Air Force combat veteran and a mom. This door behind me is from my Pavehawk helicopter. It's all that's left of the aircraft that I was flying that day. I was on a rescue mission in Afghanistan as a combat search and rescue pilot. I heard the windshield crack and realized I'd been shot. But I continued the mission and airlifted the patients out. After taking even more fire, we crashed a few miles away. But my story begins much earlier. One of my first memories was of a door, but it was my dad throwing my mom through a glass. 3 years later, Mom got the courage to walk out the door, and she opened a new one for my sister and me here in Texas. And it was here that I put my foot on the gas and followed my dream to be a pilot. And that meant opening, pushing, sometimes kicking through every door that was in my way. I signed up for ROTC at UT. Then I was commissioned as an officer in the Air Force. I served 5 years in aircraft maintenance, working on the F-16 and the B-2. I managed to get one of only a handful of slots for flight school. Then I spent a year training to fly. I flew water drops over wildfires in California, and eventually served 3 tours in Afghanistan. And then, the crash. 2 Army helicopters rescued us from the wreckage. I strapped myself to the skids and returned fire on the Taliban while we flew to safety. That got me a Purple Heart, and I became the second woman ever awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor. But after that, the door closed. Injured and unable to fly, I was barred from my next career choice because I was a woman. So I came home. I worked in healthcare and business, I got married, and started my family.
Wait, barred because I was a woman? That's ridiculous.
So I sued the Pentagon, but not just about that job, about the ban on women serving in all ground combat jobs. And I went to DC to lobby Congress, but door after door was slammed in my face. I heard things like, my boss agrees with you, but you aren't in a position to do anything for him. You're not one of our donors. Well, eventually,
We are eliminating the direct ground combat exclusion rule for women.
we won. And that opened the door for hundreds of thousands of women to compete for elite ground combat jobs. A major victory for our military.
Hold on, back up a minute. Not one of his donors? That's not how this is supposed to work.
One of those closed doors was my congressman, Tea Party Republican John Carter. Apparently, being his constituent and a veteran wasn't enough to get a meeting. I guess I also needed to be a donor. So now I'm running against him, taking on a system that cares more about campaign donors and political parties than protecting our country. Congressman Carter hasn't had a tough race his entire career. So,
We'll show him tough, then we'll show him the door.
Oops. Okay. I took a long break. I had to teach a couple of classes, but I am back now, and I'm hoping I'm on track. That we just watched the MJ Hagar video, and I'd like you to just take some notes on what kinds of emotions do you think that she was trying to elicit, and did you think she did a good job? So for example, certainly she's trying to elicit patriotism, and the ways she did that was through a discussion of her military tactics, as well as framing her policy goals like equality of women in the military as patriotic and positive moves, not just for women, but for the military itself. I also think that she wanted to show that she had a lot of grit, that her childhood wasn't necessarily the easiest, and she really fought and clawed her way all the way to the top of her Air Force class, and as well as her college, and then later in life through policy changes. Negative ads are much more common and they're on the rise, and many people think that they're more effective. But as I mentioned in class previously, there's not a lot of good evidence that they are in fact more effective, and instead that there are other more idiosyncratic reasons why so many politicians choose to use negative ads. And we are going to watch first a video about the controversy around negative ads that was just produced by a local news team in Minnesota. But I think it's really interesting. So I'll share that with you now.
TV are impossible to miss these days. Political watchers say we're seeing more negativity than usual because Minnesota has so many competitive races this fall.
We are certainly hearing that from you. A lot of viewers have emailed us asking, why do campaigns go negative? Good question. Here's Heather Brown.
From the ads you've seen so far, what have you remembered?
Remember, there's one with a Yeti.
Does Eric Paulson really exist?
He doesn't give health benefits for his employees.
Hypocrisy.
Explaining how the candidate is never there.
I was so shocked when I saw him walking by. I almost dropped the camera.
Then another ad came out.
Well, he's not telling you the truth.
That said that he does give health benefits.
Do negative ads work?
That's a great question, and it depends on what you mean by work.
Matt Mata studies campaign advertising.
The evidence that negative ads will sway an election or even move opinion by more than 1 or 2% is pretty weak.
But that 1 or 2% can make a difference. Jason Lewis beat Angie Craig by less than 2 points in 2016.
Discriminating against minorities, and even for domestic abusers and criminals.
So why do they keep doing it?
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why you might keep doing it.
One is because your opponent is.
As long as you're keeping pace, public opinion probably isn't going to move too much because of the ads.
Another reason? Voters are more likely to remember the bad stuff.
If you hear good things, it doesn't really stay with you, but then if you hear something like super tragic, everybody's talking about it.
We say we don't like negative ads.
They're just annoying.
But researchers have found people think they give them more information.
Negative ads are far more likely to talk about the issues. They're far more likely to cite sources.
It's when they get too personal, like this 2010 Kentucky Senate race.
Call the Holy Bible a hoax.
That can potentially turn voters away.
And there's actually some evidence from some scholars that negative ads can mobilize people to go to the polls, potentially in defense of their preferred candidate.
You think there's a lot of ads now?
It'll probably get even worse.
Heather Brown.
And I'm sure that I will be changing channels a lot during commercial breaks in early November.
WCCO 4 News.
Another political expert told Heather all of the nasty campaign ads during the Franken-Coleman race may have helped the third-party candidate, Dean Barkley.
There's evidence that voters chose him in response to all of the bad blood between the two leading candidates. If you have a good question for Heather, just email it by going.
So the video here, I think, makes a lot of really good, succinct points. Number one, that negative advertisements don't really work that well. They can only move the needle 1 or possibly 2%. But we have extremely tight races in the United States, very competitive races. So often elections can be won by 1 or 2%. So why not try those negative ads? Number two, as long as you're keeping pace. So if somebody shoots a negative ad at you, maybe you shoot it back at them because, as I said in class on Monday, you're thin skinned, but maybe it's just to make sure that that needle is swinging back in your favor, and that the negative, it just washes out your opponent's other negative ad. And then number three, that negative ads, while people don't like them, they're often the most remembered. And so you want a an ad that will be remembered. All right, moving on, I want to show a couple of negative ads from the 2020 election cycle, and they actually speak to one another. So it's first Donald Trump's Biden's America, and then Biden's response.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Crime will rise significantly. I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Peter Emerson, how do you think that's good?
This election will decide whether we save the American dream. We must never allow mob rule.
17-year-old being held on suspicion of first-degree intentional homicide.
Free rein to violent anarchists and criminals.
The El Paso shooting was the deadliest attack at the hands of a white supremacist in the U.S. in 50 years.
We must always have law and order.
Tear gas was used to remove peaceful protesters from Lafayette Park.
A St. Louis couple brandishing firearms against protesters.
The greatest economy in history.
The U.S. lost more than 20 million jobs just in the month of April, making it the worst jobs report on record.
We will crush the virus.
Total cases in the U.S. now top 5.8 million. The virus has killed more than 179,000.
No one will be safe in Biden's America.
So you can see some commonalities in these, not just because they're related in content. The use of words that each person said and taking them out of context with the background of imagery that is very scary, that will give visceral feelings of fear and make you feel like you are being targeted. Human beings are not very good at recognizing. They are good in their brains at recognizing they're being manipulated, but our bodies are not good at recognizing when fear is being used to manipulate. And usually you will respond with the same fear response to a real threat or a not real threat, and it can confuse your brain. And that is one reason why these are so effective. Finally, we have ads that are meant to be amusing, and studies show that these don't work very well. But the reason I think so many politicians do use humor in their advertisements is because they really think that they'll go viral. And then when they do go viral, they'll get played for free on cable news media or even network television. So here is an example of one of them.
I thought I was good at hiding. Then Eric Paulson comes along. I mean, how can you have tens of thousands of people looking for you all the time and not one of them find you? I started to wonder, did Eric Paulson really exist? I mean, where's the proof? Some blurry photo taken from miles away? I had to know, so I had to come up with a plan. Paulson takes piles of money from Big Pharma and votes to erode essential healthcare protections. So, the most likely place to find him is at a big pharmaceutical company. And that's where I went. I was prepared to stay there for weeks. It took 7 minutes. I was so shocked when I saw him walking by. I almost dropped the camera. But I got it. Visual proof. So take it from me, Bigfoot. Eric Paulson really exists.
So we can see that there are some pros and cons to this tactic of using a humorous ad. And this one in particular, I don't think does a very good job of highlighting the candidate. Dean Phillips, in case you missed it, well, that's who the ad was paid for. But instead we hear the name Eric Paulson over and over again. And for a voter who's sort of passively watching this video, might read Eric Paulson's name on the ballot and use name recognition to vote for Eric Paulson, even though that was a negative ad for that. So it doesn't really do a super good job. It doesn't talk about his voting record with Big Pharma. It just sort of makes these accusations. And then of course, the Eric Paulson in the advertisement is an actor and it's all blurry photos. So while this one might have gone a little bit viral, it doesn't do a very good job of eliciting emotion, which is necessary for these ads, or giving any kind of good information, which is also something you'd expect from a quality advertisement. Finally, we have this idea that campaign advertisements often feature the person running for Congress or even the incumbent as running against Congress, saying that they're all corrupt except for me, and I'm going to go in and clean it up, or I'm going to keep fighting for your values. And we talked about this on Monday when I showed you the video of Joni Ernst from Iowa making the members of Congress squeal and cutting the pork because she knows how to do that. She grew up castrating hogs. While that one is a really, really memorable one, almost everybody's campaign advertisements really run against Congress, especially negative ones. So it's a really common one, for example, to run against Nancy Pelosi. She's not super well liked. She has quite the reputation. Democrats don't like her that much. Republicans definitely don't like her. But she's currently the Speaker of the House and she's a representative of San Francisco. So if you didn't recognize her name, you can imagine why maybe some people aren't her biggest fan. She's also in her 80s. So she also represents the establishment Democrats. So she really doesn't embody one type of Democrat that everybody likes. So everybody sort of has a reason to dislike her, unfortunately for her. So Republicans run against her all the time, saying, this person only votes with Nancy Pelosi, they're sheep, they just do what they're told. And there's a million ads like that out there. But in 2020, there were so many Democrats that disliked Nancy Pelosi that even they started running against her. And I have an example of an ad like that.
Montanans deserve a Congress that can get things done. Unfortunately, this Congress is stuck in endless dysfunction and partisan gridlock. Both parties are responsible. Paul Ryan is retiring, so Republicans will have a new leader. Democrats also need a fresh start. That's why I won't be voting for Nancy Pelosi for leader. Instead, I'll push to find a new leadership team that ensures Congress works for all of us. Montanans deserve nothing less. I am Kathleen Williams, and I approve this message.
All right, so that is all I have on advertisements for today. Continue. I will continue to show you some more advertisements, specifically on Friday, some of the best and worst of 2016 and 2020, and maybe some I can dig up from 2022 if anyone has started yet. Thank you so much for watching and going through all these videos with me. I hope everything worked. And I'm so sorry for my forgetfulness or loss of time today during class. So thank you. See you Friday.